Good evening, everyone. I'd like to start off by saying what a privilege it is to be here tonight with so many colleagues from across the country. For those that don't know me, my name's Mark and I'm a Deputy Head Teacher for Scotland's online national school, eSchool, and I work for the Northern Alliance and Murray Council. And in my previous life, I was a Principal Teacher of Computing and Technical at Speyside High School. So tonight I'm going to present to you my demo, which is titled SQLite on Repl.it, or I can't believe it's not Access. So just like Tony, my presentation does come with a health warning as well. I'm not a database expert, so feel free to tell me how appalling my SQL syntax is as well in the chat. So I'm probably over time already, and I know we're running a wee bit late, so this is the timings I'm just going to try and stick to. I've got a big clock in front of me, so hopefully that'll keep me on track as well. Most of you have probably heard of Repl.it by now. I use it as my IDE for teaching all of computing science, apart from when I'm using Scratch. It's text-based online IDE, but it also has support for some GUI elements for some languages or games development libraries as well. I became even more fond of Repl.it when I realised that I was remote ready back in March when I was still at Speyside and lockdown came about. Repl.it supports loads and loads of languages, too many to list on this PowerPoint. It's device agnostic, it runs in a browser, and it's free for personal use. No sign-ups required, as you can download your code and people can interact with it online without signing up as well, and that's what I do with our eSchool study support. Nobody has to do any sign-up at all. And they also offer a new product called Teams for Education, which is paid for, but I believe they're giving it out free to teachers at the moment. So I've highlighted some pros and cons of using Repl.it to teach databases, and this is just my opinion. And you can feel free to disagree with me. I suppose most of this is just my opinion. I like that my IDE is common across all the different code areas in the course. I like that young people are focusing solely on developing their SQL skills rather than learning anything Access specific. I like that it can be used at home. I like the fact that it's a text-based interface. But I've also listed that as a con because you'll get some kids who would much prefer a GUI for this. Obviously, on the cons, none of us want to go through even more change or learn another new skill. We're constantly being asked to do that, and I know that kind of comes with the territory, but we've had a lot of it in the last few years. A lot of our resources are already built for Access, so there might be reluctance to change there as well. Also, data definition takes a lot longer, but after watching Tony's talk there, I think I've kind of changed my mind on that, and there appears to be some tools that would make this a lot easier for me going forward. So I'm using a database on Repl.it with two tables, ship and pilot, and I'm just about to stick that into the chat for you so that you can follow along. So this is the data dictionary for the first table, ship, and it's all Star Wars ships for those of you that likes Star Wars. I've tried to illustrate as many features as possible across both of the tables. So that's the second data dictionary there. One of the things I did want to talk about was the different sort of methodologies I use for my class materials. I tend to use class notes and video explanation of different concepts. And then present tasks as a prim task, a coursework style task, or an exam style question. And for those of you that haven't used prim before, it's just a model of teaching programming, which involves giving them something to predict, then run, then investigate why it happened. Then they can modify the code and then they can make something themselves, so applying it to a new context. I've put a link in my PowerPoint about the prim methodology if you want to look into it. On all my slides, I tend to do a bit of code, then an explanation, and then the expected output as well, just on the screen as we're going through. So some considerations when you're using Repl.it for teaching databases or indeed teaching anything. One of them would be whether or not you're getting your kids to sign up for accounts on Repl.it, and that's something you would have to consider within your own authority's guidelines. Repl.it have some guidance on that on their website, and I think Tony was going to link that in the chat for me. I had to put some boilerplate at the top of all my SQLite examples just to make it pretty on the screen, because otherwise it's really ugly because it doesn't have any headers built on, and there's like a separating character between every field in your results. And I also had to do a wee bit of code to make sure foreign keys were functioning properly and that referential integrity was brought in to consideration when you were trying to insert something into a table or update something in a table. So I'm now going to jump into some examples. I believe I am a wee bit behind already. I did expect that, so I am going to skim through them very, very quickly. This PowerPoint will be available to you afterwards, so you can just jump in and run some of the examples yourself. The select, insert, and update queries kind of all function as you would expect. I'm just going to jump into Repl.it just now, show you one of the queries running. I won't bother doing all of them. So you have to put your queries at the bottom of your Repl.it code because all your create table and insert statements are at the top. So I always get the examples always come with just a little comment at the bottom saying your query is below this line. So if I just click run on this query, it brings up the nickname of each ship and the class of the ship from the ship table, where the faction is the New Republic, and then you just get a nice wee output there in the console window. So skipping through those kind of basic queries, I did want to talk a wee bit about implementing validation and keys as well, because that will be a wee bit different for those of you that have only used Access so far. So for example, to make a field required, you have to just put the not null attribute onto a field in your create table statement. For range checks, for restricted choice, and for length checks, you have to use the check function. So I've given a wee example of that. So in the second example here, I've got a restricted choice, so that the faction has to be either the New Republic or the Empire. And then in the final example on this page here, I've got a primary key defined on the pilot table, which just is done with the attribute primary key, which also implies that it must be unique in SQLite. I'm not sure if that's the same in all SQL flavors. And then for the foreign key, the syntax is a bit strange. After whatever field is going to be the foreign key in your table, you take a new line and you run the foreign key attribute. In the brackets, you put the name of the foreign key field and then what table and field it references for the primary key. Equijoin's quite simple, just the same syntax as you would expect, just doing aware the foreign key is equal to the primary key. And then on to the higher examples, and this is where things get a wee bit tricky. So wildcards use different characters than you would get in Access. So you have the % symbol for many characters and the underscore for a single character. For aliases, it works exactly as in Access. You use the as keyword, and I always teach it with the square brackets no matter how many words, so even around single words, but that's just my personal preference. For calculated fields, it kind of works as expected. In this example, I've made a new piece of data called score, which takes the maneuverability, firepower, armor, and shields of every Star Wars ship and kind of adds it all together as a new piece of data called score. The aggregate functions, again, work as you would expect. You've got sum, average, min, max. In that second example, I've got the largest shields by each faction using the group by statement. And then for subqueries, this is probably the only bit that my learners find really, really tricky when using SQL. So when they're using queries from the result of another query, I always get them to do the first query and then build the second query on top of it, because it goes into the from clause in a SQL statement. which makes it a wee bit trickier for them to build up. So this query here finds the ship with a maximum score along with its nickname for each of the factions. So I think I'm just about there in terms of time. So please feel free to play about with examples. I'll stick about after 8 o'clock for any questions you have, and obviously you'll be able to get a copy of this presentation and try out all the examples.